Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with Inside the U. I have 10 takeaways and tidbits following today's 14th spring practice. It is almost over. The spring game is next, but there is a lot to get to before the big spring game. Now, this is based on interviews with head coach Manny Diaz, players Mike Harley, Gilbert Frierson, and Gaynor. Let's get right into it with my number one takeaway. Has to do with the amount of injuries that Coach Diaz reported, that 15 guys are going to be out for the spring game. Now, Coach Diaz broke this group into 4 categories based on when they hope to get them ready. And the biggest takeaway of the 15 guys is running back Chaney Jr. will be out for quite some time with a shoulder injury. Coach Diaz mentioned that they're hoping that he'll be ready for the season opener. Now, with some of the other guys, like Derek King, he mentioned that they hope to have him back by the start of fall camp. The fact that Chaney was not in that group tells you that this is an injury that is going to take some time to repair. It's a shoulder injury, and he's dealt with some shoulder injury stuff in the past. So hopefully this will be the end of it. Hopefully it gets corrected, but shoulder injuries are certainly difficult to overcome, and it does take time. Now, some of the other notable injuries of the 15, and for the full list, check out InsideTheU.com. But what stands out to me is that safety Bubba Bolden will be out with a toe injury. It's an injury that seemingly just popped up recently, according to Coach Diaz, but he will be out. And then also Sam Brooks, Jeremiah Payton, a guy like Brian Balaam. Those guys have been out pretty much the whole spring, and this is kind of not a good spring for them, that they've not been able to be full participants, and they will not participate in the spring game. So hopefully those guys get healthy sooner than later, because all of those young guys certainly are looking to make their mark and really get into the mix for playing time. So definitely keep your eye on those guys. Okay, number 2 has to do with Keontra Smith and then Amari Carter. Now, it's been talked about quite a bit that these 2 guys did make position changes, but none of the coaches have talked about it throughout the spring. And head coach Manny Diaz mentioned today that yes, indeed, Amari Carter's moved to striker from safety, and then Keontra's moved from striker over to weak side linebacker. These aren't huge moves in the defense, but it is just kind of hopefully getting the most out of these guys. And what stands out to me about this, Coach Diaz mentioned that he really feels like this is going to help the versatility of the defense with that back 7. He also believes the skill set for both of those players might be better in place with these new position groups. Amari Carter closer to the line of scrimmage. With him, you're able to maybe utilize his physical activity, his tackling, his on-point tackling ability, as opposed to playing in space that oftentimes the safety is required to do. Keontra Smith is a guy that I've talked about quite a bit, that he's actually played that position at linebacker in high school. So again, he's just at that different spot, moving him closer to the line of scrimmage as opposed to running around at striker. So definitely keep your eye on those 2 guys. Very curious to see how they look in the spring game. Number 3, Manny Diaz was asked about the transfer portal because he was asked earlier in the spring about the linebacker position in particular. And Coach Diaz mentioned, look, if we don't feel like we've got the right pieces in place, that yes, we will explore transfers after the spring. And he was basically just asked an update on that, if he feels like he likes what he has at linebacker, or, are they really going to look at transfers? And Coach Diaz didn't give a succinct answer about that, but just said when it's all over, they're going to go through all the practice cut-ups from the spring game, from the practices, and then they'll determine whether they're going to move forward or not. However, he did say he feels like they did make quite a bit of a step forward at linebacker, which was needed, so he was happy with the progress that they made. So maybe they're not going to go to the transfer portal in the offseason, but it's not for sure. So definitely keep your eye on that. I'll have more on the linebackers in a little bit. Number 4, wide receiver Mike Harley talked, and my question to Mike was, because I was just curious what he felt like he gained the most out of this spring. He's a guy that's been around, he's produced, he's that leader. Just curious what he felt like he improved on or got the most out of the spring. And it was kind of an interesting answer. And the thing that he said he really worked on, or feel like the spring helped him with, his fatigue. And what he meant by that was he really wants to play through either being tired, really improve his conditioning. He gave an example of, look, if there's a 20-play drive, he wants to be in on all 20 plays. Certainly that's a big ask of a wide receiver running downfield. But the point is he wants to be on the field. And as you guys remember, he wasn't, even though he led the team in yards and receptions, he was 3rd most on playing time and snaps last year among the wide receivers. So Mike's looking to be on the field more. Felt like the spring was a good indication or a good help for him, really improving the conditioning aspect of his game. Not that it's lacked or not that it's been a huge issue. It's just something that he feels like he's improved on even more. Look for that over the summer. He's always worked on his sprints, obviously, as a wide receiver, but maybe he's going to work on maybe some distant things. He didn't really explain in detail with it. I'm just thinking maybe that'll be something that he'll work on in the offseason. Looking forward to hearing what kind of summer he has, because again, there's a lot of time to improve between now and then when fall camp starts in August. Number 5, stopping the run. Coach Manny Diaz was asked about the defense. How does it look? What does he think about it? I thought it was a good question in the sense because we've heard a lot about the passing numbers that were passed on to us from the spring scrimmages, the 2 that they've had so far, and both quarterbacks did really well. It's great to hear they're doing well, but it makes you wonder what's going on with the defense if they're not able to stop some backup quarterbacks. However, what he said about the defense in particular was he really feels like they've made a great jump and strides in stopping the run. It's something that needs to happen, and he feels like, look, in our defense, it's 2 things. We got to be able to stop the run, and we got to be able to hit the quarterback. Those are 2 musts in the Miami defense under Manny Diaz, and he feels like stopping the run certainly was a point of emphasis in the spring, and he's saying today that he feels like they have made progress in that. Once again, linebackers come in and play there, and I'll talk about that right now. Number 6, linebacker Avery Huff. We've talked about him because he's made some improvements. According to the coaches, Avery's talked about his confidence level. Feels like, yes, he's made improvements. He's really settling into that battle at weak side linebacker. We've all known about his athleticism, his ability to run sideline to sideline. I've talked about that quite a few times as well. Coach Manny Diaz talked about Avery specifically and said he's as improved of a defensive player as they have this spring. Great to hear for Avery because maybe he's turning the corner after a couple years at UM. This is going to be a great turning point in his career if he does indeed show that. I think without question he's one of the main guys to watch for in the spring game because linebacker is such a key position. It's something that certainly needs to improve, and if Avery's going to be that guy, maybe challenge for a starting spot like it seems like he is, then definitely we'll see that on display in the spring game. Keep your eyes on number 9, Avery Huff. Number 7, the quarterbacks. A lot has been made about the quarterbacks, Tyler Van Dyke, Jake Garcia, throughout the spring. Have they improved or have they really emerged as guys that can be true productive backups for De'Aaron King during the season? And it sounds like Coach Diaz is pretty pleased with what they've shown and how they've performed. I'm very curious to see how they do in the spring game because it'll be our first look, the totality of their performance, as opposed to just snippets and clips throughout practices, and as opposed to just getting stats sent to us on their spring scrimmage performances. In the spring game, we will get to see them fully. Will they be able to take pressure from the defensive line? Will they be able to make correct reads? Will they be able to avoid big plays on interceptions, turnovers? And will they be able to find their wide receivers? Those are things I'll be watching for. Definitely want to see the quarterback connecting with wide receivers. Check-offs, dump-offs, those kind of things are great to running backs and tight ends. I want to see if both of those guys are connecting to wide receivers downfield. Let's see if they can make those connections in the spring game. Number 8, defensive end DeAndre Johnson jumped into the mix about midway through the spring. He was dealing with some safety and health protocols that left him out of the mix. Transferred from Tennessee. Great to get an update on him. Sounds like he's doing well. One thing that Coach Diaz mentioned with him is he's doing a good job of really just learning, asking questions, fitting into the defense. And the basic thing that he's saying is you are seeing his talent on display. You're seeing why he's here, and he feels good about that. So it sounds like he's doing well. Coach Diaz also mentioned with the defensive ends, this might be a little bit different than last year, but he feels like they've got a lot more depth this year. Maybe it was a little bit difficult, according to him. Jalen Phillips, Quincy Roche playing so many snaps. Both of them are highly productive players, but they were out there quite a bit. It sounds like Miami's going to have more of a rotation of guys. Maybe the top end starters aren't going to have that kind of workload, and the backups are going to have more. So maybe you're going to see 4 to 5 guys at defensive end as opposed to 2 handling the load. DeAndre Johnson, certainly one of those guys. All the other guys that you guys know, Jafari Harvey, Zach McLeod, all those guys should be on display in the spring game. Watch for those guys. I'll be very interested to see if those guys can get to the quarterback because it's certainly a key point for the defensive ends in this Miami defense. Number 9, wide receiver Xavier Stoops, second-year player, didn't play much last year. he's produced, it sounds like, in the scrimmages. Mike Harley was asked, what is Xavier doing? What's different about him in this last year? Mike thought about it for a little bit and basically said this is a guy that really understands the offense, understands the college game, and frankly, when he gets in there, he's a playmaker when he gets the ball in his hands. So those are all great qualities for a young guy, but not just that he's understanding what to do in the slot receiver position, but basically he's able to understand what all of the positions are doing. He's really taken to that, understanding the offense as a whole. Certainly that's great to hear for a young player, being able to dissect what's supposed to be going on with the offensive players and with the defensive players as they look to defend the play. Good to hear with Xavier. He's one of those guys. Watch for him in the spring game. He has a chance to have a big game. I think so, because I do think he's going to be one of those guys that's out there quite a bit. That gets to my 10th and final takeaway of the day, and it's the spring game. Everyone is excited for Saturday's spring game, 11 a.m. ACC Network. It'll be televised live. It will be held at Hard Rock Stadium. Coach Diaz mentioned that it's great to be able to perform at Hard Rock. It's not always the case every spring. They were actually there for their last scrimmage, so this will be the second time that they're out there, which is a great sign. Coach Diaz mentioned that, look, this is great for our players to be able to get into the stadium in that kind of a setting. It's not the same as a game, but he's just looking forward to being out there and getting guys out there, because Miami's first game, as everyone knows, against Alabama, it could be a lot of people in attendance, certainly waiting to see how everything's going to shake out. But basically, just being at the stadium, hopefully replicating any sort of same situation or familiar experience as what they might face in the opener, regardless if it's Alabama or any other opponent. So it'll be good to see, definitely stay locked in on InsideTheU.com for all your coverage of the Miami Hurricanes, the spring game coming up. And before I get out of here, I want to thank everybody. We're getting really close to 12,000 subscribers to the channel. It's incredible the amount of support you've showed. I just want to thank everybody for that. So thank you for subscribing, thank you for watching, and take care.